The slap echoed across the luxury shopping district so loudly that even strangers stopped walking. People turned. Phones came out. Across from her stood Daniel Okafor, the man she once called her husband. The same man who had left her when she was at her lowest. The same man who had called her a burden. And now, after 3 years of silence, he stared at her with nothing but disgust. "I can't believe you're still shameless enough to show your face in places like this," Daniel sneered, straightening his designer suit, as if slapping her had dirted him. A small crowd began whispering. Some recognized Daniel, the successful entrepreneur recently engaged to a wealthy socialite. Others simply saw what looked like a rich man publicly humiliating a poor woman. Amara lowered her gaze, not because she was weak, but because she had promised herself never to let this man see her cry again. Not after everything. Not after the nights she slept hungry while he built his career using her sacrifices. Not after signing divorce papers with trembling hands because he told her she was holding him back. But what Daniel didn't know was that the woman standing in front of him was no longer the broken ex-wife he discarded. And he was about to find out in the worst possible way. Because just as Daniel lifted a finger to point at her again, a fleet of black luxury vehicles screeched to a stop. The entire street went silent. Car doors opened one after another. Men in black stepped out first. Tall, armed, expressionless. The air itself suddenly felt dangerous. And then, he appeared. Kong Min-jae. The name alone was enough to make powerful men lower their voices. CEO by day, Shadow King by night. A Korean billionaire with ice in his veins, blood on his hands, and enough influence to destroy entire families with one phone call. Rumors called him many things. A ruthless businessman, a criminal mastermind, a mafia heir, a monster. But right now, none of those titles mattered. Because the feared man in the tailored black coat walked straight through the crowd, past everyone else, and stopped in front of Amara. His eyes fell briefly on her red cheek. Something dark flickered in his expression. Not anger. Something worse. Controlled fury. The kind that didn't scream. The kind that buried people. Then, in a move no one expected, he gently lifted Amara's chin. His voice came low and calm. "Who touched my wife?" The crowd gasped. Daniel froze. His face lost all color. "Wife? No. Impossible." Daniel looked between Amara and the terrifying man before him, as if his brain refused to process what he was seeing. Amara herself looked shaken, not because she wasn't used to Min-jae's protection, but because of the dangerous silence in his eyes. She knew that look. Someone was about to suffer. And Daniel had just made the biggest mistake of his life. But what happens next changes everything. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to Official_Threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Amara Adeyemi never imagined her life would become this complicated. 3 years earlier, she was just another struggling woman trying to survive in Seoul. She had arrived from Nigeria with little more than a suitcase, student debt, and a dream too expensive for reality. Her mother had died young. Her father disappeared even earlier. By 24, Amara had learned a painful truth about life. No one was coming to save her. She worked 3 jobs. Morning shifts cleaning offices. Afternoon tutoring children in English. Night shifts washing dishes until her fingers wrinkled from soap and hot water. That was when she met Daniel. Back then, he was different. Or maybe she was simply too in love to see him clearly. He was ambitious. Charming. Funny when he wanted to be. He made her feel chosen. Special. Seen. He talked about building an empire. Starting businesses. Living in luxury. And Amara believed every word. She believed in him so much that when his first startup failed, she sold her gold necklace, her late mother's only gift, to help him recover. When rent was due, she skipped meals so he could focus. When he doubted himself, she became his emotional anchor. And for a while, Daniel loved that. He loved having a woman who made him feel powerful, useful, needed. But success changes people. Or perhaps it reveals them. As Daniel climbed socially, Amara became inconvenient. Her simple clothes embarrassed him. Her modest job embarrassed him. Her lack of wealthy connections embarrassed him. Soon, compliments became criticisms. Affection became irritation. Conversations became arguments. Until one rainy night, Daniel came home with divorce papers. No warning. No discussion. No remorse. Just cold efficiency. "This marriage is no longer beneficial," he had said. Beneficial. As if their love had been a business transaction. Amara remembered staring at him through tears, asking if he ever truly loved her. Daniel's silence had answered everything. So she signed, and walked away with nothing. No savings, no home, no dignity left intact. For months, life became unbearable. She couch surfed, worked endlessly, cried in private, smiled in public, and slowly rebuilt herself. Not because she was strong, but because survival gave her no alternative. What she didn't know was that fate had much darker plans waiting. One winter night, after finishing a cleaning shift at an upscale hotel, Amara witnessed something she was never supposed to see. A man bleeding, collapsed behind the building, snow staining red beneath him. At first, she almost walked away. Instinct screamed danger. But when the injured stranger weakly grabbed her wrist, everything changed. His hand was cold, his breathing shallow, and despite the blood soaking his white shirt, his face remained hauntingly calm. Beautiful, sharp jawline, dark intense eyes, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers and crime documentaries. "Help me," he said. Just 2 words, but somehow impossible to ignore. Amara hesitated. This decision would soon backfire. Still, against every rational thought, she dragged him into an abandoned storage room, found first aid supplies, pressed trembling hands against his wound, and spent the next hour trying to keep him alive. The stranger watched her the entire time, studying her, not speaking much, only occasionally wincing from pain. "You should leave," he eventually murmured. "Someone might come." Amara frowned. "You're losing blood and worried about me?" A faint, almost invisible smile touched his lips. Yes, that was their first meeting, though she had no idea who he was. By sunrise, black vehicles surrounded the alley. Armed men stormed the area. Amara panicked, but the stranger simply exhaled as if mildly inconvenienced. One bodyguard rushed forward. "Chairman Kong." Amara froze. Chairman? That was how she first learned his identity. Kong Min-jae, a name even foreigners in Seoul recognized. Head of Kong Group, owner of hotels, real estate, shipping companies, tech investments. One of the youngest billionaires in Korea. And according to whispered rumors, something far darker. Min-jae stood despite his injury. Towering, composed, as if nearly dying had been a minor scheduling issue. Before leaving, he handed Amara a black card. No explanation, just a name, an address, and a single sentence. "If you ever need work, come here." Then he disappeared into a sea of black suits. Amara stared at the card for a long time. She had no intention of using it. Until 2 weeks later, when her landlord threw her belongings outside for overdue rent. Life had cornered her again, and desperation makes strange decisions feel logical. So she went. The address led to a mansion unlike anything she had seen before. Massive gates, private guards, landscaped gardens that looked too expensive to touch. A house so luxurious it barely resembled something humans actually lived in. Inside, she was interviewed by a stern older woman named Mrs. Han. House manager. Terrifying. Efficient. Emotionally unavailable. "You will clean. Organize. Assist where necessary. Speak only when required." Amara nodded quickly. She needed this. More than pride allowed her to admit. What she didn't know was that working inside Kong Min-jae's home would completely alter her life. Their second meeting was less graceful. Amara accidentally spilled coffee on confidential documents. Not ideal. Min-jae stared at the ruined papers. Then at her. His expression unreadable. Mrs. Han looked ready to bury her in the garden. Silence. Heavy silence. Then Min-jae calmly removed his glasses. "Can you read Korean?" Amara blinked. Poorly. They were duplicates. She stared. "That's all." "That depends." He leaned slightly closer. "Do you always panic this dramatically?" For the first time since arriving, Amara noticed something strange. Behind his coldness was amusement. Tiny, barely visible, but real. And that confused her more than anger would have. Life in the mansion became a routine of tension. Min-jae was impossible to understand. One day, indifferent. The next, weirdly observant. He noticed when she skipped meals, when she limped from overworking, when she coughed. He never asked directly. Instead, solutions appeared mysteriously. Medicine left outside her room. Food prepared. A softer pair of work shoes delivered without explanation. Amara suspected Mrs. Han at first, until the older woman scoffed. "You think I care if your feet hurt?" So yes, it was him. But why? Meanwhile, danger was already approaching. Because Min Jae wasn't simply a businessman. He lived in a world built on enemies, deals, violence, power struggles, and blood. Soon, Amara began noticing things. Late-night meetings. Security increases. Bodyguards with visible bruises. Calls answered in cold, clipped Korean. She knew enough not to ask questions. Until one night. Gunshots shattered the silence. Everything happened too fast. Glass exploded. Security alarms blared. Mrs. Han screamed for everyone to move. Amara ducked instinctively. Before she could react further, a body slammed into hers. Min Jae. He covered her with his own body as bullets shattered a nearby window. Her heart nearly stopped. His arm wrapped protectively around her head. Stay down. His voice was terrifyingly calm, as if assassination attempts were routine inconveniences. She stared at him in disbelief. You're hurt. Not yet. Even in chaos, he sounded irritated. That moment changed something. Not dramatically, not instantly, but irreversibly. After the attack, Amara could no longer pretend Min Jae was just her employer. He had shielded her without hesitation, risked himself first. No one had ever done that. Not even Daniel. Especially not Daniel. As weeks passed, their emotional distance slowly cracked. He began asking small questions. About Nigeria. Her childhood. Her favorite food. Her dreams. Nothing deeply personal, but enough to feel intimate. She learned things too. Min Jae hated thunderstorms. Never celebrated birthdays. Hadn't slept properly in years. His mother died when he was 12. His father built an empire through cruelty. And Min Jae inherited both wealth and enemies. Pain shaped him early. Love never stood a chance. Until perhaps now. Of course, no slow burn romance survives without chaos. Enter COG1. Min Jae's fiancée. Or more accurately, the woman everyone assumed he would marry. Beautiful. Elegant. Rich enough to weaponize diamonds. And absolutely threatened by Amara. G1 noticed everything. The way Min Jae's eyes softened around the maid. The subtle concern. The attention. It infuriated her. So she began quietly targeting Amara. Humiliation. Sabotage. Cruel comments disguised as politeness. You're lucky. G1 smiled one afternoon. Women like you rarely experience luxury up close. Amara forced a neutral smile. She refused to react. But G1 wasn't finished. At a family dinner, she orchestrated a trap. A missing bracelet. A false accusation. And suddenly Amara was publicly accused of theft. Rich family members pounced immediately. Of course they did. Poor girl. African maid. Easy target. How predictable, one aunt muttered. Amara felt humiliation crawl under her skin. Again. Always again. But before anyone could escalate, Min Jae entered. He assessed the room once. Then spoke. Searched G1's handbag. The room froze. G1's expression cracked. The bracelet was found instantly. Silence detonated. Min Jae's gaze turned glacial. You framed my employee. G1 tried laughing it off. But Min Jae wasn't amused. Leave. Min Jae. I said leave. That was the first public sign. He was choosing sides. And everyone noticed. Especially Amara. Which terrified her. Because feelings were no longer hypothetical. She was falling. Dangerously. Stupidly. Hopelessly. And he was the last man she should ever want. But what she didn't know was that Min Jae had crossed that line long ago. He realized it the night she fell asleep in the library. Book in hand. Head resting awkwardly against a sofa. Exhausted. Peaceful. Unaware. He stood watching her far longer than necessary. Something painfully unfamiliar tightening inside his chest. Not desire. Something gentler. More dangerous. Attachment. And men like Kang Min Jae did not survive attachment. Still, resisting became impossible. Rainy drives home. Quiet dinners after late shifts. A shared umbrella. A hand briefly brushing hers. A jacket placed over her shoulders. Nothing explicit. Everything intimate. Until one night changed everything. Amara found blood on his shirt again. Old nightmare returning. She confronted him. You could die and act like it's weather. Min Jae stared. You're angry? Yes. Why? Because she cared. Too much. But saying that aloud felt catastrophic. So she whispered instead. Because losing people is exhausting. That answer did something to him. Something final. He stepped closer. Close enough to erase oxygen. Rain tapping softly outside. Tension unbearable. And then, he kissed her. Slow. Careful. like a man touching warmth after years of winter. Amara melted before logic could intervene. It was everything. Everything she shouldn't want. Everything she secretly did. And for one perfect moment, nothing else existed. Not danger. Not class differences. Not enemies. Just them. But happiness in stories like this never arrives without punishment. G1 discovered the affair, or what she believed was one, and revenge came quickly. She leaked false information implying Amara was a gold digger manipulating Min Jae. Photos, edited conversations, rumors. Media frenzy exploded. Online harassment followed. Amara was devastated, not because strangers judged her, but because part of her feared they were right. Who was she? A maid. A divorced woman with financial trauma, falling for a billionaire mafia boss. It sounded absurd, unbelievable, unbalanced. So when Min Jae was called away on urgent business, Amara made a terrible decision. She left. No goodbye, just resignation, a note, and disappearance. This decision would soon backfire catastrophically, because her departure created vulnerability, and Min Jae's enemies had been waiting. If they couldn't reach him directly, they'd target what mattered. And now, what mattered had finally become obvious. Amara. She was kidnapped 48 hours later. A warehouse. Cold chains. Concrete floors. Rival syndicate. Classic nightmare setup. Their leader smiled cruelly. So this is the weakness. Amara's pulse thundered. For the first time in years, she felt truly helpless. But not for long. Because Kang Min Jae did not negotiate well with people who touched what was his. The rescue was brutal. Explosive. Terrifying. Gunfire. Chaos. Bodyguards storming the building. And through smoke and panic. He came. Like vengeance wearing a tailored coat. Min Jae found her tied to a chair. Bruised. Terrified. Alive. His face changed the moment he saw her. Not relief. Something deeper. Something nearly painful. He untied her personally. Hands unexpectedly gentle. Did they hurt you? Amara shook her head, tears finally falling. He cupped her face and whispered words that shattered every wall she had left. Don't disappear from me again. That was his confession. Not polished, not poetic, but honest in the only language he trusted. Fear, need, possession softened by love. The aftermath was messy. G1 was exposed fully. Disgraced. Cut off socially. Daniel, already humiliated publicly, attempted damage control. Too late. The video of Min Jae confronting him had gone viral. His business partnerships began mysteriously collapsing. Funny how consequences work. Daniel even tried apologizing. Amara simply smiled politely. No anger left. Just closure. You lost me long before the divorce, she told him. And that was that. Final. Finished. Over. As for Min Jae, he did something no one expected. He changed. Not completely. He was still dangerous. Still feared. Still capable of terrifying silence. But softer around her. Warmer. Human. He slept better. Smiled occasionally. A shocking development for everyone involved. Months later, at a private family gathering, Min Jae's grandmother took Amara's hands warmly. You brought life back into this house. Amara nearly cried. For the first time in years. She felt home. Not temporary shelter. Not survival. Home. One evening on the penthouse rooftop, overlooking Seoul's endless lights, Min Jae stood beside her quietly, then handed her a small velvet box. Amara blinked. Min Jae. It's not dramatic, he said flatly, which somehow made it funnier. She opened it. A ring. Elegant. Simple. Terrifyingly beautiful. Her breath caught. He looked almost offended by his own vulnerability. You already act like you belong here. A pause. Then softer. So stay permanently. Amara laughed through tears. Only Kang Min Jae could make a proposal sound like a legally binding acquisition. Yes, she whispered. And for once, the feared mafia boss smiled without restraint. A rare, breathtaking thing. The kind people might kill to witness. Their story wasn't perfect. Too much history. Too much darkness. Too many scars. But maybe love was never about perfection. Maybe it was about finding someone willing to stand beside your chaos. Someone who sees your damage and stays anyway. Someone who protects not because you are weak, but because you matter. In the end, Amara learned that love does not recognize status. Not poverty. Not wealth. Not nationality. Not past mistakes. And Min Jae learned the most dangerous thing of all. Even the coldest men are not immune to warmth. Trust heals what power cannot. Loyalty matters more than appearances. And sometimes the person society overlooks becomes the center of someone else's universe. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from and comment your favorite moment below, like this video, and subscribe to _Threads for more emotional Mafia love stories.